Hey guys, it's Anthony, the MMA and political analyst. And today we're going to do a little bit of politics, and we're going to talk about the whole situation in Ukraine, along with Russia and the United States. So the big question at hand with the situation, the huge question that everybody seems to want to ask me, and the big question that people want to know is there going to be a war? Is there going to be a war between the United States and Russia, or NATO and Russia? And are we going to go back to having some kind of Cold War? There's a great book out. Um, it's an older book from, I think, 1986, 1987, written by Tom Clancy, called Red Storm Rising. Excellent, excellent book. It just basically talks about, what would happen in some type of scenario in a conflict between the then Soviet Union and the NATO allies. Excellent, excellent book, especially if you're kind of into military stuff. Great, great book. But basically, the question is that type of scenario going to break out, in modern times in 2014, 2015? And the answer, without a doubt, is a resounding no. It's not going to happen, guys. So calm down. Seeing a lot of posts all over the internet. Oh my God, World War III is coming. It's going to be nuclear war. The end times are coming. Stock a bunch of food. Grab your weapons. Go get a bunker. Blah 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 blah. Calm down, guys. Not going to happen. Now, as with anything, of course, there's the potential for it to happen, but the likelihood of it happening is extremely, extremely low. And so, of course, why? Why do you say that? Well, the reason is this. Guys, you have to understand, we live in this outrageously interconnected world. Not only socially through the internet and social media and telecommunications and things like that. Not only through that, but economically. And that's the key point. We're much too economically interdependent on each other to just start these big, huge wars between two major countries. It's just not going to happen. The billionaires and the top 1% of the world, not only the country, the top 1% of the world, they're not going to be having no huge conflict like that, right? The people that secretly run the world have no interest in some huge conflict between two major powers. Not going to happen. And when I talk about the people who secretly run the world, I'm only being slightly sarcastic, but no, I'm not talking about the New World Order or the Illuminati. I don't mean anything like that. I just mean the rich and powerful people throughout the world who have the most influence have no interest in any type of conflict. That's just not what they want, right? And they're not going to let it happen. You're going to see, you know, some type of potential conflict start to happen, and immediately you're going to see peace talks happen. Leaders from Russia, the United States, are going to be meeting up in Geneva somewhere, or through the UN, or whatever the case may be, and there'll be some type of peace agreement almost immediately, right? This is not going to devolve into a conflict. I could almost guarantee it at this point. It's not going to happen. The United States relies heavily, heavily on Russia for heating oil, or not heating oil, but just oil in general. I think Europe relies on Russia heavily for heating oil specifically. And we buy a lot of oil from Russia and other goods, and it's just not something that's in our interest, and it's not something in their interest either. Once we stop buying all that stuff, the Russian economy goes into the tank, and it's over. Don't get me wrong. I think Russia wants to try to gain as much power and influence as it possibly can, through trying to affect the internal politics of the country of Ukraine. And if you're not familiar with the whole Ukraine-Russia situation, I encourage you to go look it up, research it, read about it. Again, there's going to be people who are kind of on either side of the issue. They think that, hey, this Russia has a right to have some kind of influence in Ukraine because there's Russian citizens living there, whatever. Okay. And there's some people who think, hey, Ukraine's an independent country. You can't just go in there and take them over. You can't just snatch up their land like they did in Crimea. You'll find two people on either side. But like with many stories that we're going to talk about, the facts are out there. You can look them up yourself. I'm just telling you what I think about it. Okay. But anyway, I think Russia is going to try to exert as much power and influence as they possibly can, but they're not going to go over the top. Okay, they're not going to jump the shark, as it were. They're not going to They're not going to do anything that's going to provoke a guaranteed military response by the West. That's just not what they're going to do. They're not going to just go attack, a NATO country, for example. They're just not going to do it. Now, Ukraine is not a NATO country, so they feel they have a little bit more leeway in how they handle that situation. Now, there's a lot of Russian troops right now stationed in eastern Russia, which is um, or excuse me, Western Russia, which is the eastern border of Ukraine. And are those troops going to just cross the border and move into eastern Ukraine? Maybe, possibly. Is that going to provoke a military response by the West? I doubt it. Okay, there will be some serious sanctions though, um, but I don't think that it's going to provoke an immediate military response. It may cause tensions in the regions to rise. We'll probably send some you see NATO start to deploy troops in the region and bolster its positions, but they're not going to just counterattack. Okay, it's not worth it. I mean, you guys have to remember the West and the U.S. in particular is in a terrible position right now. Terrible position. I mean, the people of the United States, you really think they want to go to war again? I mean, come on. If you live in the United States and you're watching this, you want to go to war again, this time against Russia, after all these years of wars, and finally we think it's over, and now they're going to start another one? Yeah, I don't think the American people are even remotely like down for that. Okay, it's just unfortunately we've kind of uh, we've just kind of expended the whole military option with these unfortunately these wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. I think have got the American people like, hey man, we're done with all this, man, all this war and conflict, man. We don't want no part of that anymore. And so it's going to be a tough sell for the leaders of the country to turn around and be like, hey guys, look, just one more. This time with Russia. Come on, guys, just give us one more war. It's just not going to happen. So I couldn't imagine any politician openly advocating for war if something does happen in Ukraine. Obviously, things are different if they actually attack a NATO country, in which case we'll have to respond, legally and morally, of course. Like, we promised these people would help them, so we have to respond. But again, Russia is going to be smart enough to not go after a NATO country. They're going to do everything they possibly can to get as much power and influence and whatever they want to gain from it, and just kind of push the buttons as far as they can push them. And when it gets to a point where it's going to result in a military response, you'll see them back off immediately. You'll see them back off, sue for peace, try to get some kind of deal, and try to get as much out of it as they possibly can. But they're not going to go to war. They're just not. And I think I think that's just the way the situation has kind of developed in these last few years. Uh, the United States doesn't really have a moral leg to stand on to tell the Russians, hey, you can't invade countries, because we kind of did, right? So we don't really have a leg to stand on anymore. And again, that's just unfortunate, but that's the situation we're in. That's just how it works out. So I think Russia's probably gonna win out in this situation overall. Unfortunately, I mean, I'm not like a big fan of Vladimir Putin. I have no interest in the way he runs his country and the way these intimidation tactics he's using against his neighbors. But there's really nothing we can do about it. There's just not. So I think the West is going to have to try to turn up the heat economically on Russia a little bit as much as possible. But you got to remember, the more we turn the heat up economically on them, the more they could just flip that around and hurt us, right? So what are we going to do now, right? And also with Europe, I mean, like I said, Europe relies heavily on Russia for heating oil. So all of a sudden we start turning up the heat economically through sanctions and whatnot. All of a sudden the European allies are like, oh, hey guys, we want to try to stay warm in the winter if you don't mind, United States. So calm down with those sanctions. And it's going to be tough to get some kind of agreement and some type of some type of bilateral action to take against Russia with all our European allies. So it's going to be a tough situation to deal with, but in the end, we'll get it figured out. But there's not going to be any war. That's the main point. There's not going to be a war between the United States and Russia. It's just not going to happen because that would almost immediately cut off all trade with Russia, and the oligarchs that run Russia, that's not what they're interested in, and they are a major reason why Putin has been able to stay in power all these years. They've more or less got the green light from the Russian oligarchs. If that green light goes away, you'll start to see the government of Russia start to destabilize real quick. So I don't think that's in the cards for them. It's definitely in the cards for us. So everybody just calm down. No war is going to happen with Russia. It's a dangerous situation, and there's always the potential for it. But trust me, it's almost I'd give it like less than a 10% chance of happening in some type of military conflict. Less than 10%. So anyway, guys, thanks for listening. Comment in the comment section if you like the video. Hit the like button, subscribe, all that same stuff. This is Anthony, the MMA and political analyst. Talk to you.